Thanks everyone for joining us. Today's topic is on updating, or patching as it's often called in the Windows world, software. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how Robot Cloud handles software updates, because we get this question a lot, and it's a legitimate question because many management solutions out there either don't handle software updates at all, or the process requires a lot of work to make it happen. And you're busy, you're smart, you know that you're highly overqualified to be spending time patching a fleet of Macs. However, you are also most likely the one responsible for keeping software up to date, working, and secure. So how do you deal with it? We've put a lot into making Robot Cloud simply work when it comes to software updates. And we've been using it and testing it across thousands of devices in hundreds of offices here in Chicago and around the world. We have a lot of experience. If you have any questions either during or after the presentation that don't come up, please reach out to us. And if you have any ideas for improved workflows, because things are constantly changing, please let us know. I want to start off with Chad. Could you walk us through kind of the three buckets of updates that Robot Cloud tends to deal with most often?
Yeah, absolutely. The three buckets, as you can kind of see by their groupings here on the screenshot. Apple updates, because they're their own beast. Adobe and Microsoft, while each of their patching methods are just a little bit different, you'll see why they require a more sensitive approach. And then you've got the other category. Almost everything else can be patched in the same way.
To check out the full list of others, you can go to that URL there at the top, forgetcomputers.com/robot-cloud-software, and you'll see a list of currently patched and installed software if you need it installed. And if we're missing anything from that list, please let us know so we can investigate adding it. Did you want to add anything else to that slide right there, Chad?
Yeah, I was going to mention that in regards to the Apple updates, we are only talking about the updates that are provided as if you were running the software update command, and not ones purchased by the App Store. I think we go into that more later.
Yeah, I'll show that in just a minute. In addition to the types of software that we update, we treat Apple a little differently than other software applications, primarily because Apple updates sometimes require a restart. And obviously, we don't want to interrupt anyone who's sitting at their computer in the middle of the day trying to get work done, and then suddenly this pops up and says, we're about to restart your computer, it being Robot Cloud Alert. So what we've decided, and what seems to work really well for us and our clients, is patching or updating Apple software on the weekends only. And we take it a step further with the desktops. We set the desktops to wake and go to sleep on the weekends, or wake and shut down, turn on and shut down. So what will happen is the client doesn't need to do anything with their desktop. They just walk away. Saturday and Sunday, it turns on, it checks for updates, it shuts down. And if any of you out there, Robot Cloud users, have desktops that are missing weekend updates, let us know. We can add that ability to turn your Mac on and shut it down. Or some people prefer to have their own, patch window, and we can customize that for you as well. The other software, Chad, do you want to just speak briefly to how we deal with everything outside of the Apple?
Oh, certainly. With Adobe, Microsoft, and other, each of those fleets of applications, and this is including Creative Cloud 2015, going all the way back to CS5, each time a Mac checks in once per week, any available updates are applied. In the case of Adobe, there could be a scenario where if the application is open, it will be skipped until the next week, but all Adobe applications that are not open do get patched. For Microsoft and other, it doesn't matter if they're open or if they're closed, they do get patched in the background. And what will happen is that when the user closes that app and relaunches it, they're using the latest version.
Okay, thanks, Chad. I also wanted to jump back a little bit on the Apple updates. Desktops, I said we turn on the weekends, but notebooks, which a lot of people have notebooks these days, we don't do any power management, we don't do any turning on, turning off, and a lot of people use their laptops over the weekend. And, I was a little nervous when Chad and I talked about this years ago. I said, do we really want to be patching over the weekend? We have no idea what people are doing over the weekend and when they might have to restart their computer. But we slowly rolled it out to more and more customers until we had everyone on board. And Chad, I don't think we got a single call about it, did we?
No, No, not a single call.
People are much more
Oh, go ahead,
forgiving
please.
on the weekend when they get that alert about restarting than obviously during the workday. That works really well, and outside of having a strict patching window when you notify your employees that they need to have their computer on and awake, it works really well, and I'd recommend everyone just do that, which basically if you're in Robot Cloud, that's what you're doing now unless you've told us otherwise. Chad mentioned earlier that when we talk about patching Apple software, I want to be clear that we are talking about these items: OS 10 updates and system data files and security updates. And Chad, I believe that includes iTunes and Safari. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, those are not tied into the App Store whatsoever. Those are considered to be part of OS 10.
Right. So basically, all apps that do not require an Apple ID get automatically updated. If they do require an Apple ID, we are not updating them. However, we have been testing and considering checking all of those boxes so that we would start applying those updates. Now, an Apple ID is still required, and that's why we're testing it and starting to roll it out incrementally to discover what type of Apple ID issues, questions, discussions we might have to have with customers when we actually enable that. And I'd love to get feedback from everyone on the call about if they'd like to see that in their own environment, if they've tried that, if they ran into issues. If they want to beta test with us, please let us know. Just to summarize it, if there is an update, your Mac is going to get it. If you have software installed and you're enrolled in Robot Cloud has that update, it's going to get installed whether it's over the weekend or whether it's throughout the week, depending on the type of application. However, you always have the option to opt out. And one scenario of opting out would be with Adobe and the Adobe workflow, especially when it comes to cross-platform workflow involving InDesign and InCopy. We've had a few customers over the years. The Mac users are on InDesign, the Windows users are on InCopy, and it's really critical that those applications are patched at the same time together and that there's parity, because if the Windows users upgrade or patch and the Mac users don't, the workflow can break. So in that case, we're not patching any Adobe until IT is ready or until the department who's managing that workflow is ready. And then we schedule it and we roll it out and it works great. So let's talk about some common reasons why software doesn't get updated. Chad, do you want to just talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly, the very top left reason, if the machine is off, powered off or asleep, then it'll clearly miss any kind of check-in and it will not get updated. So with the desktops, at least within our environment, we do power them on and off to mitigate that. But as far as laptops go, if somebody takes their laptop home and doesn't use it all weekend and brings it back in on Monday, they, for example, will have missed one patching window for Apple update. So over time, over a week, 2 weeks, as a matter of attrition, eventually they turn on the laptop over the weekend and it does get patched. So we have seen some variants a week or 2 weeks without updates for laptop users, but since we control the desktops, we see remediation very, very quickly. As far as the other items here, not checking in, if the computer itself has had a problem, and say the operating system was reinstalled but it wasn't re-enrolled, or perhaps there was some other update to it that broke the line of communication with Robot Cloud, the machine would stop checking in hourly and thus would stop getting any kind of updates. When a machine gets over 14 days overdue to check in, we generate an alert so that you are notified and you can take action to fix it or re-enroll it. Some other somewhat less common items, a proxy or firewall, it can absolutely block the communication either with Robot Cloud or with the different locations where software updates may be pulled from. This we see in taking on new clients, or especially, say, a Mac population within a greater Windows environment where they may need to whitelist or make exceptions for everything to work properly. So that's something definitely to explore if you do already use Robot Cloud and you take in a new client, or if you're considering it. Other options, it could be the update is not available yet or just too new. There are some types of applications where we do not update them right away. We install, we test, we want to make sure it doesn't break anything. For a majority of Robot Cloud updates, they're not updated more than once a week. So during that once a week check-in, everything will get patched. There are some scenarios, namely with, say, like Chrome or Firefox or even occasionally Adobe Flash, where they release multiple updates in the same week. So when the computer checks in, it'll grab whatever is the latest at that time it checks in, and the following week it'll get another update if there was another one posted there. So that's another reason why you could see a slight variance. And finally, yeah, as I mentioned before, the app is open, and that only applies to Adobe Creative apps and Apple apps. And for example, iTunes or Safari, some of you may have seen if you run your updates manually and you have those apps open, you'll get a dialog window saying that the app is open and you need to close it. Those are some that cannot be patched silently in the background.
Yeah, and if someone has Photoshop open because they're working on a project and they leave it open all week, then it's not going to get patched until they close Photoshop, right, Chad?
That's correct. Yep. And initially, when we were rolling out this type of method, similar to the Apple updates on the weekends and whatnot, we were looking at the versions. We were looking at any possible support desk tickets related to a variance in patching. And what we found is that most people do not have it open 100% of the time. So it does eventually get patched. If there was a critical reason to go ahead and push it out, if there was a security exploit for Photoshop, which I hope will never happen, we do have the tools to go ahead and prompt the user to close their apps and get them patched and reopen them. But by and large, just as a matter of attrition, within a week or two, it does get patched.
Let's talk about 3 ways to force an update, because obviously automation is great, letting it happen is fantastic, but sometimes for one reason or another, you just want that app update right away. And self-service is an easy one, both for you, the administrator, or for your support desk. If someone calls in and you discover that they need an update, maybe it just came out, or maybe their machine was off and over the weekend and missed it, you can have them launch self-service and run that update on their own, even if they're not an administrator. You can also force an update through the command line. We have a web article, which I've done a small screen grab there at the bottom, and there's a short URL that you can visit that talks about how to use the command line to trigger all of these software updates and other items as well that are included in Robot Cloud. And lastly, you can always contact us if there's a special case where you want to trigger an update at a certain time or upon a certain event, or you want to add a new software package that we don't have. Contact us, because we're always open to enhancing Robot Cloud in any way we can. Here are some examples of self-service, and I want to walk through 3 different examples. One is install all updates, and we explain in the info box what this means. You can read it here. You can open up your own self-service and see what it looks like. In this case, we're hitting the big ones: Adobe, Microsoft, Apple, as we say here, a few other third-party applications. And this is often used maybe during a brand new Mac install, where you don't want to wait for the auto updates to happen. You just want to make them happen right away. Is that right, Chad? Is there another use case that we've found for this?
Yeah, we typically use it either when onboarding a new client, or say we reinstall an operating system and re-enroll, or do something to that effect. Then we'll just run it just to make sure everything's on the up and up.
Yeah. I prefer to just let things happen automatically, but hey, this is not.
Type B, yep.
Now, also, if you just want to focus on the Apple software, and especially if there's going to be a restart required, let the user know, hey, you might want to run Apple, save your work, run update Apple software, be prepared for a restart, and then you'll be able to get back to work. So that's another one that's included in self-service. And then, of course, you can go to the application level, and in this case, we're updating just the Adobe Creative apps. This is a slightly older version of Creative Suite that's on my machine. That's where I got the screen grab. But we do patch all the way up to the most recent version of Adobe Creative Cloud. So those are 3 examples of self-service, which you can run, your clients can run. They're available. And if they're not available, it's probably because the software is not installed, doesn't exist, or it's completely up to date. So vetting, Chad talked a little bit about vetting or approving updates. And Chad, I'd like you to talk just a little bit about this, because I think you have the most experience with it.
Yes, with Apple OS X updates, the updates that we vet are the Delta revisions. So 10.11.1, for example, or back to 10.10.0, 10.10.1. Anytime there's a change like that, we tend to disable that Apple patching for usually a week, sometimes 2 if we find to be, some bugs or things we're not entirely sure about before we roll it out to our base. And that's just to protect the integrity of the machine, not to create a scenario where the user would not be able to run their apps that may have broken as a result of a security change or something like that. The rest of the Apple framework, be it Safari or iTunes or the Apple security updates, those always get installed at the time of availability. We feel that Apple has done a good job in testing those, and in our history of updates, we have yet to get burned in that type of way. So we trust those from Apple. The larger, like Delta updates, we do not. We just want to make sure they're okay.
But speaking of getting burned, there are 2 other names on this list who have burned us. So
Exactly. Yep. So Microsoft and Extensys products, those are 2 that are not immediately available either. There have been several times where Microsoft has released a Service Pack update that has reduced the compatibility with Outlook, namely, and in some cases other applications. So we like to make sure that that is working normally for all of our client base before we roll it out to Robot Cloud. So when there is a new update available for Office, that would usually take between 1 week to 2 weeks for it to start to roll out, as we just want to make sure that nothing breaks as a result of keeping it up to date. Microsoft has not had a great track record there. With Extensys, most of their updates are pretty spot on. However, when they do release an update and they decide if they find something later on, what they'll do is pull it and put the old version back. So we wait on that one as well, just to make sure they're extremely confident in the product they're giving out. That way we don't have to worry about uninstalling and reinstalling an application. Because of those 2 scenarios, those products you wouldn't see updates for immediately. Those would come in within a week to 2 weeks, depending on how stable they appear to be.
Yeah, and Chad, part of the reason Extensys gave us so much trouble with one of their updates is because we're always looking for the latest update, right? So if they give us the latest update and then they pull it and replace it with an older update, then we're essentially going from an upgrade to a downgrade, and that can cause issues that we do not want.
Exactly.
How soon are updates available? We've talked a little bit about this, but most of them day 1, as soon as the developer releases them, we're going straight to the developer to get them. But in some cases, we want to do some testing, some vetting, some custom work in a few cases, and those almost always involve the Apple OS, Microsoft, or Extensys. At least that's our list today. And as Chad mentioned, typically within 2 weeks we have those updates. And in fact, one update that Microsoft put out that broke Outlook, we had a patch out there and working, I think, day 1, maybe day 2, and Microsoft took, I think, a week or 2 to get that out, Chad?
That's correct. Yeah, that was the nested folders issue. That was a good one.
Okay. So that... that's the bulk of the presentation. I want to see if we have any questions, but I did want to point out that I want to encourage you to visit forgetcomputers.com/what's new or what's-new to keep up to date on anything that we are working on. We just posted today a crash plan update or automation called Update Crash Plan Name. I'm showing it to you here as a self-service action, but it runs automatically, so you don't need to. It's just we like to give people the option to force it if they want to. But we were having a real challenge with keeping our computer names matching our crash plan names, because the crash plan name would get filled at first enrollment and never looked at again. So we don't like to rely on manual changes. We like automation. So we recently built an automation to update that name, and our team is very excited about it. So check that out. And I want to say thank you again to everyone. You can also follow us on Twitter. We do post updates there as well. So Kat, do we have some questions? Here's one. Can I use Apple's software update server or caching server? Chad, can you speak to that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With the caching server in OS 10, that you simply just turn on, and it's been described, it's just magic, it just works. And if you have that enabled, it will redirect App Store traffic, iOS traffic to the local server as opposed to coming from the internet. So that doesn't really require any Robot Cloud configuration. You can just turn that on. Regarding the software update server, if you have a Reposado installation or an OS 10 server, with software updates turned on and you want them to come locally so you can control what's seen and not seen, we can absolutely help you with that. All you would need to do is tell us the URL for that software update server, and we can ensure your Macs are set to use it.
Okay, great. There is another question that did come through, and it's where do updates come from? I know we've been talking a lot about automation, pushing things out. So yeah, if we could maybe, Chad, share a little more detail on how we push those updates, where do they come from, and yeah, elaborating on that for some of our listeners.
Do they come from
Sure.
heaven, Chad? Is that where they come from?
They come from the aether of the internet. They come. We go directly to each of the developer sites. We don't rely on any type of other relays or other sites that are aggregates of that. We go right to the developer site for those updates. So when, say, for example, a new version of Flash Player is being downloaded, it's coming directly from Adobe. It's not coming from another source. It's not coming locally. It's not cached in advance. It's coming at the time of execution directly downloading to the Mac.
Looks like we have one last question, unless there's another one, Kat, that about Robot Cloud local distribution point. Is that still something that is relevant?
Yeah, the local distribution point, having the local repository for the installers is still very valid. Now, while a lot of the updates are coming directly from the different vendors and developers, the main installs are still copied and installed from a local distribution point if you've run our setup utility. We see a great deal of value in that. The installers themselves are much too large to run, especially if you're going to run a batch of upgrades at the same time. So I would still encourage the use of a local distribution point. Robot Cloud Sync is what we call ours, and that way any kind of OS upgrade or larger install, like Adobe Creative Cloud, which can be 12 to 13 gig, the latest version of Office 2016, that's around 4.5 gig, I think, something like that. A very, very fast distribution method using local versus having all of that come through your WAN. But for the smaller updates, especially 50 meg, even 100 meg, it really is just a drop in the bucket for most internet connections.
Yeah, and if anyone out there, if you go to info.robotcloud.net, it'll redirect to this area where you can do a search for, I just typed in local, and here's an article on creating a local distribution point. We make it very easy. It's just an installer to run. And of course, if you have any questions, please reach out to us. That is our presentation for today. Here's some more contact information. If you have any questions that you feel aren't, ticketing worthy through our ticketing system, you can always reach out to Kat and she can help you. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Have a good day. Send us feedback, send us questions, send us ideas for next month's topic. Thanks. Bye.